The standard format is the main competitive format of the Pokemon TCG, allowing players to use cards printed from the last 2 years in their decks. Once a card leaves standard, it's still usable in the expanded format. Expanded allows players to use all cards released since the first Black and White expansion from 2011. Notably, this means there's no official format to use cards from before 2011, leaving over a decade of cards nowhere to be played. Players who prefer playing cards from before Black and White era, or who may just want to change a pace from the high-powered standard and expanded formats, can enjoy playing retro formats for their unique gameplay and card pools. Today, we're going to be taking a look at some of the most popular retro formats, their best strategies, and what makes them stand out within the Pokemon TCG's 25-year history. It only makes sense to start off with the most iconic retro Pokemon format, Base Fossil. This format is made up of the Pokemon TCG's first 3 sets, Base, Jungle, and Fossil, plus all promo cards that were legal at the time. As the oldest format featuring cards from the most nostalgic era of Pokemon's history, many players view this as the go-to format if you want to experience something different from the modern-day standard. In fact, the differences between Base Fossil and current Pokemon TCG are so harsh, it's almost like playing 2 completely different games. The most significant rule difference is that supporter cards don't exist. Instead, there are only trainer cards with no subclasses like Stadium, Item, and Tools that players know today. Any card that was labeled as trainer could be used as much as you want in a single turn, just like items now. With the existence of Professor Oak, Bill, and Computer Search, the Base Fossil format features an unbelievable amount of draw power. Drawing every card in a player's deck was extremely doable, and the potential explosiveness provided by such powerful trainers is a key part of the format's identity. Since there was no restriction on a player's first turn, you could easily set up almost anything you wanted by abusing the lack of limits on trainer cards. However, players that overuse all of their draw trainers will lose a lot of Base Fossil games. This brings us to the second most defining feature of the format, its very low power Pokemon. If you tell a modern Pokemon TCG player that one of the best aggressive Pokemon on the format is Scyther, a card notable for its 3 energy / attack 3 KOing Pokemon, while its resistance allows it to defensively counter Hitmonchan, you'd get scoffed at. Thanks to even the most aggressive Pokemon rarely knocking out other Pokemon within 2 or 3 attacks, Base Fossil games play at a very slow pace and focus more on resource management. If you overextend on your first turn by playing too many Professor Oak, not having any Professor Oaks to use in the late game can leave a player with no meaningful way to respond to an opponent's setup, on top of making you vulnerable to running out of cards in your deck, which causes you to lose the game. Although you can recover discarded trainers with Item Finder, this card's cost puts you down resources over a long game, especially if used in multiple copies. If you play 4 copies of Bill on your first turn, your opponent may start theirs with last, shuffling all the trainers you drew back into the deck. If they do, both players will hope to draw a good trainer card to gain more advantage, a position unfavorable for you as your opponent will still have 4 Bills they can draw while you don't. Even over-attaching energy to your Pokemon can be a problem. If you attach a double colorless energy without using it to attack that turn, energy removal gets rid of it permanently. If you try to load up a single Pokemon with lots of energy, super energy removal can set you back multiple turns and leave you with no energy cards on field. Since Pokemon's attacks won't end games quickly due to their low damage, preserving your powerful trainer cards for the best possible moment to use them is a core facet of the Base Fossil format. This slower gameplay and lower damage output also puts an emphasis on Pokemon's resistance, something rarely relevant in more modern formats. In the Base Fossil format, a resistance reduces all damage dealt to a Pokemon by the resisted type by 30. With so much emphasis placed on properly managing resources, being able to use an on-field Pokemon to prevent an opponent's Pokemon from dealing damage is invaluable. Is your opponent using Hitmonchan's low-cost jab attack to accumulate chip damage? Simply promote a Scyther to the active spot to prevent all damage jab would deal. Did your opponent set up a fast Mewtwo thanks to energy absorption? One of the format's many colorless Pokemon can put a stop to it by limiting Cyburn's damage to 10. With how strong resistance is in the Base Fossil format, many decks often use 2 to 3 different Pokemon types in decks to complement each other. If your Mewtwo struggles to beat Wigglytuff, perhaps pair it with Hitmonchan to deal super effective damage, or Electabuzz to deal neutral damage. This dynamic causes the Base Fossil format to have lots of different multi-type decks with different kinds of basic energy, something you rarely see in the modern TCG. With the general feel of the format explained, let's look at some of the strategies that are popular in base Fossil. Back in 1999, players thought Haymaker was the best strategy. The deck revolved around playing some combinations of Hitmonchan, Electabuzz, Scyther, Mewtwo, and occasionally Magmar to take KOs against opposing Pokemon using their efficient, low energy cost attacks. Each of these Pokemon have good 1 or 2 energy cost attacks that apply consistent offensive pressure to opposing Pokemon. By having such low attack costs, or in Mewtwo's case, a way to recover energy, these Pokemon are resilient to opposing energy disruption from the likes of energy removal and super energy removal. Using their own energy disruption, a Haymaker player can stifle an opponent's setup while attacking them with the Pokemon best suited for individual matchups. This deck also leveraged utility trainer cards to great success. Scoop Up allowed any damaged attacker to be returned to the hand, both denying a prize card from the opponent and allowing the Haymaker player to promote a new Pokemon to the active spot. With Gust of Wind, no bench Pokemon was safe from being targeted. Lastly, in a case where a player needed a little bit more damage to secure a KO, they could play plus power to increase an attack's damage by 10. While players considered Haymaker the best deck back in 1999, modern players of base Fossil format have a different opinion. Nowadays, players believe Lickitung to be the best deck. This Pokemon's Tongue Wrap attack deals 10 damage and can paralyze the defending Pokemon, making it unable to attack or retreat during your opponent's next turn. Combine this with a staggering 90 HP, excellent Psychic-type resistance, and low attack cost, Lickitung has propelled various control decks and stall strategies to the top of the base Fossil metagame. This Pokemon is often paired alongside Scyther or Mewtwo, which resist fighting-type Pokemon that threaten Lickitung or hit them super effectively. The inclusion of these two Pokemon also makes taking 6 prize cards a lot easier for the deck. Another possible partner to playing control decks is Moltres, a Pokemon that puts cards from your opponent's deck into the discard pile, allowing Lickitung decks to accelerate the time it takes for them to win by the opponent decking out. The gameplay of base Fossil is something that modern Pokemon TCG simply can't replicate. The slow gameplay that puts heavy emphasis on preserving resources is both fun and skill intensive. The balance between overpowered trainer cards and weak Pokemon creates gameplay that's wholly unique to this format. If you want to play retro format, base Fossil is a great introduction, since finding these old cards is actually quite easy. The game's massive popularity in 1999 meant a lot of booster packs were opened and that anything but holo rare cards remain accessible to this day. That's not to say the format has no issues. One issue players may find with base Fossil is its limited card pool, featuring only 3 different sets, which means many of the same cards are represented in almost every deck. Luckily, there exists another retro format which alleviates this problem. The base Neo format expands upon the fundamental idea behind the base Fossil format by nearly quadrupling the card pool, featuring the Pokemon TCG's first 11 expansions instead of only 3. Taking all 6 first-generation sets, Base, Jungle, Fossil, Team Rocket, and the 2 Gym sets, and combining them in a format with the second Pokemon generation's 4 Neo sets, Neo Genesis, Neo Discovery, Neo Revelation, Neo Destiny, greatly expands the number of variable strategies, deck variations, and helps speeds up the game a little. Because Pokemon are more powerful in base Neo thanks to 2 years of power creep, individual games within this format aren't as defensive as they are in base Fossil. Additionally, the format isn't as focused on powerful basic Pokemon, although they still exist, and features many viable strategies that revolves around Stage 1 or Stage 2 Pokemon. With this brief introduction out of the way, here are some of the best cards playable in the format. Cleffa is by far the single most important card in differentiating the base Neo format from base Fossil. This Pokemon is both an excellent consistency tool and a defensive stalwart, greatly hampering the offensive power of many decks. For 1 energy, the Eek attack allows you to shuffle your hand into your deck and then draw 7 new cards. The mere existence of this attack means decks don't need to rely on powerful trainer cards to find specific cards out of their deck. Eek specifically benefits evolution strategies like Kingdra and Steelix that may not want to discard pieces of their evolution line or difficult to recover special energy cards. Cleffa also bolsters these strategies by giving them time to set up thanks to the baby rule. Whenever an opponent's Pokemon attacks while a baby Pokemon is active, the opponent must flip a coin. If tails, the attack does nothing. The baby rule makes dealing with baby Pokemon a struggle, even more so when they have Focus Band equipped. Unfortunately, this effect also prevents attacks which deal no damage, so occasionally games get to a state where 2 Cleffas try eking at each other to no effects thanks to lost coin flips. These awkward moments are well worth it though, as by having Cleffa in the active spot, players both slow down the game to enable evolving strategies and have boosted consistency to find whatever cards they need. Not to mention that the mere existence of Eek invalidates disruptive trainer cards that reduce a player's hand size, such as the Rocket's Trap. Another important difference between base Fossil and base Neo is the presence of cards designated specifically to counter energy removal and super energy removal. The widespread use of these two trainer cards made playing slower paced decks with high attack costs nearly impossible, homogenizing the metagame around low costed attacks and basic Pokemon. The most generic of these cards is Recycle Energy. When this energy is put into the discard pile, it goes back to the hand. You may still be behind on energy on your Pokemon, but the card will remain in your hand for the next turn. Eco Gym is a stadium card that gives this kind of effect to all energies, allowing you to rebuild your Pokemon's energy while your opponent burns their limited trainer cards. Energy Charge allows you to shuffle up to 2 energy cards, including Special Energy, from the discard pile back into the deck based on coin flips. Some strategies can even use Brock's Protection, a card that attaches a Brock's Pokemon and makes its energy cards immune to removal. In combination with Brock's Ninetales, a Pokemon that can turn into any evolution card, you can make any high-cost attacker completely immune to disruption. Make no mistake, energy disruption cards are still prevalent to the format. They just aren't as meta-warping as they were in base Fossil, but they're a lot more fair and help keep otherwise ban-worthy threats in check. Now onto those ban-worthy threats. Sneasel is the best damage dealer in base Neo format due to its unmatched efficiency. For 2 Darkness Energy, Beat Up lets you flip a coin for each Pokemon you had in play, dealing 20 damage times the number of heads. If you have 6 Pokemon in play, Beat Up maximizes out a whopping 120 damage. At the time, there wasn't a single Pokemon that had over 120 HP. 120 wasn't even the attack's maximum damage output thanks to how Darkness Energies worked at the time. In the base Neo format, there was no such thing as a basic Darkness or Metal Energy. Instead, these 2 energy types could only be fulfilled by their corresponding Special Energy, meaning you can only have a maximum of 4 of each in your deck. Each energy had a special effect to compensate for the limited quantity you could play. Metal Energy reduced all damage dealt to the attached Pokemon by 10, but reduced all damage dealt by the attached Pokemon if it wasn't a Metal type. Darkness Energy was the opposite, increasing all damage dealt by the attached Pokemon by 10, and dealing 10 damage to the attached Pokemon in between turns if it wasn't a Dark type. This effect means that simply by fulfilling Sneasel's attack cost, the damage output is increased by 20. The only downside to this Pokemon's incredible power is the limited number of energy cards it can play to satisfy Beat Up's costs, 8 in total with 4 Darkness Energy and 4 Rainbow Energy. As a result, Sneasel decks are built with lots of utility cards to protect their limited energy. Energy Charge and Eco Gym are staples of this strategy, while more niche options like Knockdown can take energy removal cards out of your opponent's hand. Other variants of the deck may play a second type to facilitate an attacker that's resistant to energy removal. Rocket's Zapdos, for instance, can use its 1 energy plasma attack to attach electric energy from the discard pile to itself. In a matchup where your opponent's deck is full of energy removal, you could primarily use Rocket Zapdos instead of Sneasel. This deck is powerful, but it's not unbeatable, with many slower strategies being viable. One such example is Brock's Ninetales with Steelix. By attaching the former with Brock's Protection and using its shapeshifting Pokemon power, you can make any evolution Pokemon immune to energy removal. When not disrupted, a Steelix loaded up with Metal Energy can reduce upwards of 40 damage from attacks each turn. If backed up by healing trainers like Goldberry and Healing Field, a single Steelix can become impossible for many decks to KO reasonably. Once your Steelix is unstoppable, the opponent can't fight back against constant Tail Crush attacks. These 2 examples only represent a fraction of the strategies possible in base Neo format. If you want to play a format that has the most broken trainer cards in the TCG's history, but don't like the very low-powered and slow gameplay of base Fossil, then this format is for you. Both base Fossil and base Neo are incredibly fun, but some players don't enjoy playing with the broken trainer cards. For players that enjoy the Pokemon TCG's current system of items, supporters, and powerful 2-price Pokemon EX, then the Ruby Sapphire EX formats offers a change of pace and power level while also resembling the current game's mechanics. The Ruby Sapphire through Power Keepers format, more commonly known as RSPK of EX format, represents all 16 main sets released during the 3rd generation of the Pokemon TCG. Interestingly, EX format was never actually played historically, as these sets were never all in the standard format at the same time. For example, the 2005 World Championship format featured the first 9 EX sets. The 2006 format has sets 9 through 13, and the 2007 format has the final 3 EX sets. Each of those historic Worlds formats have individual problems and problematic strategies. The reason the unofficial RSPK format is so popular is that by expanding the card pool from either of these World formats to the entirety of the Ruby and Sapphire block, the number of unique viable strategies and counterplay to powerful cards increase. In fact, this format is widely regarded amongst retro Pokemon players as being one of the best ways to play the TCG thanks to its variety and available strategies and ability to help mitigate bad matchups and deck building. By far, the most defining feature of the EX format are the presence of two prized Pokemon EX, the Hold-On Engine and Pidgeot. The Hold-On Engine is a selection of supporter and trainer cards that provide the deck reliability in setting up their main Pokemon. The core of the engine is the trainer card Hold-On Transceiver. This card lets you add a Hold-On supporter from your deck or discard pile to your hand. In the early game, this card provides 4 extra copies of any Hold-On supporter you need, and in the late game, it can be used to recover any important Hold-On supporter. Some of the options to search include Hold-On Mentor, which adds 3 basic Pokemon with 100 HP or less from your deck to your hand, Hold-On Scientist that draws cards until you match your opponent's hand size, and Hold-On Adventurer, which draws either 3 or 4 cards based on what you discard when you play it. Outside of the Hold-On engine, the most played supporter card is Rocket's Admin. This supporter card causes both players to shuffle their hand into their deck and draw cards equal to their prize cards. Just like its modern counterpart, Iono, Rocket's Admin is a generic comeback tool that makes sure an opponent can't pull too far ahead in the game. Often played with these cards is Hold-On Castform, a Pokemon that could be attached to other Pokemon as an energy card by returning another energy that Pokemon already has attached to it to your hand. While on a Pokemon, Castform provides 2 energy of any type. This Pokemon allows Hold-On Mentor to search for an energy card, makes Pokemon with strength attack costs like Lugia EX more playable, and provides card advantage by functionally drawing an extra energy when it's played. If you're playing a deck heavy on Delta Pokemon, the meaning for the little symbol in this card's attack, then this card can even be a setup tool with its Delta Draw attack. Castform is arguably the second best Pokemon in EX format, with the best being Pidgeot. This Pokemon's quick search Pokepower lets you search your deck for any card once per turn. This effect is so powerful that when it was printed in the standard format recently, the Pokemon Company put it on a Pokemon EX, and it's even better in this format. Importantly, during this time period, you can use Rare Candy on your first turn of the game, or on a Pokemon that was put into play the turn you use it. This means you can actually quick search as early as the first turn of the game. Pidgeot is far and away the best card available to play with decks divided into 2 categories of Pidgeot and anti-Pidgeot strategies. Decks which have lots of evolutions such as Bombtar, Gardevoir, and Blastoise love using Quick Search to get any necessary evolution piece or rare candy, a utility Pokemon, or some important trainer card. Decks which don't utilize Quick Search will always play cards like Secession Crystal, Solrock, or Battle Frontier to shut Pidgeot down. So, what strategies are popular in RSPK? The most popular deck is Bombtar. The deck's main goal is to use Electrode EX's Extra Energy Bomb to power up multiple Tyranitar and Scramble Energy and Darkness Energy. Since Extra Energy Bomb knocks out Electrode EX, Scramble Energy's powerful effect of providing 3 energy of any type while behind on prize cards will always be alive. With large amounts of energy attached, players can use either of Tyranitar's 3 attacks. For 1 energy, Grind deals 10 damage, plus 10 more for each energy attached to this Pokemon. For 1 darkness and 2 colorless energy, Spinning Tail deals 20 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon. Lastly, for 2 dark and 3 colorless energy, Bite Off deals 70 damage plus 50 more if the defending Pokemon is a Pokemon EX. Each of these attacks are relevant, and players are likely to use each of them at least once per game. With multiple Scramble Energy attached, Grind can potentially one-hit KO many non-EX Pokemon. The same is true for Bite Off, which KOs basic Pokemon EX like Rayquaza EX. Generally speaking though, Bombtar will be using Spinning Tail to slowly accumulate damage on all of your opponent's Pokemon. In doing so, the deck gets to be behind prize cards from their opponent, maximizing Scramble Energy's value and enabling POW hand extension to disrupt opponent's energy cards. When enough damage is on your opponent's bench, Ancient Technical Machine Rock can be used to devolve the opponent's Pokemon and cause the lower HP basic to get knocked out. Another iconic deck in EX format is Gardevoir. This Pokemon EX has one of the most unique Pokepowers in history. Once per turn, if Gardevoir EX is in the active spot, you can put an Imprison counter on one of your opponent's Pokemon. If you do, that Pokemon's Pokepower and Pokebodies have no effect. Also, for 1 fire and 2 colorless energy, Flame Ball deals 80 damage and moves a fire energy attached to this Pokemon to another one of your bench Pokemon. Imprison allows this Pokemon to shut down opposing Pidgeot or other high power Pokepowers like Blastoise's Energy Rain, while itself getting to use Pidgeot. This utility is backed up by Flame Ball being a fantastic attack, 2-hit KOing most other Pokemon EX while preserving energy on your board, in the event that Gardevoir EX gets knocked out next turn. This can be especially useful when the fire energy you're moving is whole on cast form, since any Pokemon you move it to will likely be able to attack the following turn. Gardevoir EX also synergizes well with another Gardevoir. The latter can provide either more energy movement with its Energy Jump Pokepower, or serve as an alternate attacker. For 1 metal and 1 colorless energy, Psychic Rage deals damage to an opponent's Pokemon of your choice equal to the number of damage counters on this Pokemon. Excellent for picking off low HP basics if your opponent fails to secure a KO on the previous turn. Also, for 1 Psychic and 2 colorless energy, Black Magic deals 10 damage plus 20 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. This attack can one-hit KO opposing Gardevoir EX if their opponent's bench has too many Pokemon, getting a positive prize trade. These may be considered the 2 best decks, but you really can't play anything in EX format. As an example of some of the many rogue options, here's a few rogue decks and how to play. Arcanine EX attacks multiple Pokemon per turn with its Overrun attack, while slowing your opponent down with Houndoom, Crystal Breach, and Cetacean Crystal. Dark Steelix attaches its dual-type namesake with as much metal and darkness energy as possible to create a high damage and resilient threat. Even fossil Pokemon, an archetype so historically terrible we made a whole video about it, are playable rogue decks. The EX format's enormous card pool allows Team Assembly Ammonite and Kabuto to be played alongside the best Amistar and Kabutops cards that they couldn't be played with historically. The EX format is one of the game's most popular retro formats, and for good reason. If you have an older collection, or are okay with proxying otherwise prohibitively expensive Pokemon EX, give this format a try. Seeing as we've covered a format for each of the first 3 generations of Pokemon, it's only fitting to talk about a format featuring cards from the Diamond and Pearl era of the games. The most popular format this era of the TCG is the 2010 Worlds format. This standard format had an unusually large card pool due to the Pokemon Company opting to not rotate the earliest Diamond and Pearl sets out of the format at the beginning of the qualifier season. This format allowed players to use cards from 13 mainline sets compared to the usual Worlds format allowing 9 or 10 sets worth. Every single set from the Diamond and Pearl era plus the first 2 sets from the short Heart Gold and Soul Silver block are available in the Worlds format. The expansive card pool of 2010 Worlds gives the format a near unmatched potential for deck building and innovative strategies, although a clear best deck exists. The format, including the first 2 Heart Gold and Soul Silver sets, also provides it with powerful cards to boost strategies that are far less good playing with just the Diamond and Pearl block. So, what is it that defines the 2010 Worlds format? This format, more so than any other, is defined by its complex and mechanically diverse cards. As an example, take a strong and popular card in the format like Flygon. This card has both a Pokebody and 2 attacks. In the modern TCG, Pokemon very rarely 3 in any combination of attacks and abilities unless it's attached to a gimmick like a V-Star Pokemon. Even then, there are usually filler attacks that aren't really relevant to Pokemon's competitive success or how it's played. Every single line of text on Flygon is important for how you play the card though. Pokemon from this era are rarely only good because they have a single powerful attack or effect. Rather, they feature a combination of attributes that make them worthwhile. The complexity of an individual card increases further when you take into account level X Pokemon, the mechanical gimmick from the Diamond and Pearl era. If you, for example, had Flygon in your active spot, you could have it level up by playing Flygon level X on top of it. A level X Pokemon provides its previous card with more HP and additional effects, because level X Pokemon can still use all Pokepowers, Pokebodies, and attacks of its previous stage. Now, this Flygon, which has 3 great effects, suddenly has 5 effects that are each likely to be used throughout a game. Of course, not all cards in the format are like this, and there are many Pokemon that are only used for a singular attack or effect. But the example shows how cards can be far more complicated in 2010 Worlds than during any other format in the game's history. Level X Pokemon also had a unique deck building restriction because they technically had the same name as their base forms, just a different level, which is functionally just flavor text. This means you can only run a total of 4 of the base card and the level X card. Deck builders have to balance consistency with how many level X Pokemon they include. Importantly, level X Pokemon still only give up a single prize card. Most games in the 2010 World format are against decks using only single prize Pokemon and don't have ways to take more than 1 prize card per knockout. With just single prize Pokemon, a back and forth game in this format can often reach up to 40 minutes and are incredibly skill intensive. Another defining feature of the 2010 Worlds is the SP mechanic. SP Pokemon are an archetype of Pokemon cards that are all basic Pokemon and have many trainer cards which support them. The most significant of these utility cards is the supporter Cyrus's Conspiracy. When played, this card lets you add a supporter card, basic energy, and a Team Galactic's invention from your deck to your hand. A Team Galactic's invention was a subset of trainer cards that worked specifically with SP Pokemon. This card provides SP decks with a consistent setup tool, able to access any important trainer, whatever basic energy they need to attack, and a supporter for the next turn. If you need to add a Pokemon from your deck to your hand, SP Radar lets you search an SP Pokemon. If you want to play aggressively, Energy Gain is a search tool card that reduces the attack cost of an attached SP Pokemon by 1 colorless energy. If any of your SP Pokemon were in danger of being knocked out, or you wanted to reuse Pokepowers that were activated when you played from the hand, Poketurn could be searched to return any SP Pokemon on your field to your hand. If you want to disrupt your opponent, search Power Spray. You can play this trainer card during your opponent's turn to prevent the effect of Pokepowers that activate as long as you have 3 more SP Pokemon. As for what supporters were popular to search, Roseanne's Research can grab more Pokemon or energy from the deck than Conspiracy could, Pokemon Collector can search any 3 basic Pokemon, and Professor Oak's New Theory can draw a fresh hand of 6 cards. Most of the time though, you'd be searching for another copy of Cyrus's Conspiracy to keep the card advantage flowing. There are 3 SP Pokemon you'll likely encounter both in and outside of dedicated SP strategies: Luxray GL level X, Garchomp C level X, and Crobat G. When you level up into Luxray GL level X, the Bright Look Pokepower lets you switch any of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active one. For 1 electric and 1 colorless energy, Flash Impact deals 60 damage to defending Pokemon and 30 damage to one of your bench Pokemon as a downside. Bright Look is the format's best Boss's Order effect. In SP decks, this Pokemon attacks for a single energy thanks to Energy Gain and applies immediate offensive pressure on your opponent's weak basic Pokemon. In non-SP decks, Luxray GL level X represents a Boss's Order that's reusable by Poketurn. Garchomp C level X is the other half of the iconic Lux Chomp strategy, a deck built around the best SP Pokemon and their synergy. When leveled up, the Healing Breath Pokepower restores all damage from all of your SP Pokemon, potentially denying your opponent a knockout on the following turn. For 3 colorless energy, Dragon Rush deals 80 damage to any of your opponent's Pokemon, but forces you to discard 2 energies attached to Garchomp C level X. The attack also can't be used during your next turn, which rarely matters thanks to the Pokemon's free retreat cost in Poketurn. With Energy Gain attached, Dragon Rush's attack cost and downside can be fully paid by a single double colorless energy. This attack is many decks' best tool at picking off low HP basic Pokemon like Uxie or utility Pokemon like Claydol. Lastly, we have Crobat G. When this card is played from the hand onto the bench, Flash Bite puts 1 damage counter on any of your opponent's Pokemon. Cards which boost your damage output are almost always excellent, and Crobat G is one of the best in history. Thanks to this Pokemon being an SP, the Pokepower is highly reusable with Poketurn, meaning a single copy of Crobat G potentially represents 50 damage over a single game. SP Pokemon only represent a small portion of the card pool, and many of the best Pokemon in the format aren't SP cards. Uxie is a staple you'll see in almost every deck. When played from the hand, this setup Pokepower lets you draw cards until you have 7 in your hand. This effect allows any deck to recover when low on cards in hand or when setting up a lot of Pokemon. Anytime this effect is printed in the modern TCG, it's given to a 2-price Pokemon, like Shaman EX or Crobat V, due to needing a downside. Drawing up to 7 cards off of a single Pokemon is ridiculously strong, and in the 2010s World format, the effect is balanced by the existence of Power Spray. If you disrespect the trainer card and put yourself in a bad situation to get more setup draws, you may just lose the game. The Pokemon also isn't useless after being put on the bench because it has the level X. Uxie level X's trade-off Pokepower lets you look at the top 2 cards of your deck each turn and put one of them into your hand. A common play in the 2010 World format is promoting a bench Uxie to the active spot after one of your Pokemon is knocked out. As your first play, you then level up. After, attach it with an unknown Q to give the level X Pokemon no retreat cost before continuing your turn as normal. Another widely popular utility Pokemon is Claydol. Once per turn, the Cosmic Power Pokepower lets you add up to 2 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck, then draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. This Pokepower is the best variant of a B-Barrel style effect ever printed. Normally, the downside to an effect like Industrious and Sizers is that you may be in a position with lots of bad cards in your hand and won't be able to draw. Cosmic Power not only draws up to 6 cards, but can replace 2 bad cards in your hand with random ones, giving decks in 2010 Worlds an unprecedented level of card selection. Evolution Pokemon also have excellent support available in the format. Spiritomb is a popular card that both slows down the pace of SP decks and helps evolution strategies set up. While this card is in the active spot, Keystone Seal prevents both players from playing any trainer cards. It also has the Darkness Grace attack. For 0 energy, this card lets you search your deck for any Pokemon that evolves from one of your bench Pokemon and evolves it. The player going first could attack during this time. So Darkness Grace set up a potential turn 2 stage 2 Pokemon for many decks. Nearly all evolution decks can play Spiritomb, although more aggressive evolution decks like Garchomp, Kingdra, and Machamp prefer a different card. Broken Time Space is a broken card, arguably being the best card in the game's history, and is only balanced specifically because it exists in this format. While in play, Broken Time Space allows both players to evolve their Pokemon during the turn it was played or had evolved already. Spiritomb and Broken Time Space gives evolution decks 2 options for handling the fast aggressive SP decks. Either you slow them down or match their speed. Just like in EX format, the top 2 decks are pretty well known, those being SP variants and Gardevoir Gallade. The most historically popular SP variant was Luxchomp, a fast aggressive deck that uses both Luxray GL level X and Garchomp C level X to take quick KOs. Luxchomp deck lists are highly flexible and can be tuned to help improve any given matchup. Dialga G level X gives the deck an edge against Spiritomb with its Time Crystal Pokebody disabling the former's trainer line. This card is also valuable against other SP decks since the base Dialga G's Deafened attack prevents only an opponent from using trainer cards. If you're struggling against opposing Dialga G level X's, either Blaziken FB level X or Infernape E4 level X can one-hit KO Dialga and put you in a favorable position. Lesser played but still valuable cards included Dragonite FB and Toxicroak G to knock out opposing Garchomp C level X and Luxray GL level X. There are even SP control decks, abandoning the usual aggression for lock pieces like Cyrus's Initiative and Chatot G. Gardevoir Gallade, better known to the 2010 World Champions as GG, is built around Gardevoir and a combination of fantastic Poke powers and attacks. Once per turn, Telepass lets you use the effect of any supporter in your opponent's discard pile. This Poke power allows the GG player to functionally play a second supporter card every turn, accumulating massive amounts of advantage that your opponent just can't keep up with. Backing up this Poke power is the Psychic Lock attack for 1 Psychic and 2 colorless energy. This attack deals 60 damage and prevents your opponent from using any Poke powers during their next turn. Not only does Gardevoir allow you to pull ahead of your opponent by giving you a second supporter effect per turn, but it also prevents your opponent from catching up with effects like Cladal's Cosmic Power. Helping boost the strategy slightly is Gallade. For 1 Psychic and 2 colorless energy, Psychic Cut deals 6 damage plus 20 more for each prize card you turn face up when you use the attack, and they remain face up for the rest of the game. This attack gives GG a means to one-shot any problematic Pokemon, maxing out at 180 damage by flipping over 6 prize cards. If you don't need all the extra damage at once, you can leave some number of prizes face down for later use. With Spiritomb to set up double colorless energy to power attacks quickly, this deck can be a menace to play against if unprepared for. And of course, here's a small list of other strategies playable in the 2010 Worlds format. Arceus is a deck built around all the different Arceus cards, and the fact that they have a rule allowing you to play as many of them in your deck as you'd like. Use AR5 Arceus's Ripple Swell attack to attach an energy card from your deck to 6 different Arceuses on your board. With Beginning Door to boost consistency and Ultimate Zone to move around energy however you like, you can take advantage of the different Arceus' cards' unique attacks and typing. If you want to hit your opponent for weakness, but don't like the attack of Arceus with that type, level up your active Pokemon into Arceus level X to use any attack on your board with any type that you want. Regigigas is a deck built around Regigigas level X, and locking your opponent out of Poke powers with the Mesprin, while limiting their cards in hand with the Judge or Giratina. When Mesprint is put on the bench, the Psychic Blind Poke power prevents your opponent from using any Poke powers during their next turn. Both the Judge or Giratina shuffle each other's hands into their deck and make them draw 4 cards. When your opponent is limited in resources, Regigiga level X's Giga Blaster deals high damage and forces them to discard a card. Either when your bench is full and you need to make room, or when setting up in the early game, this Pokemon's Sacrifice Poke Power can be used to knock out one of your bench Pokemon to attach 2 basic energy cards from your discard to it and remove 8 damage counters from it. When the opponent is low on cards in hand and can't use Poke Powers, Regigiga level X's massive 150 HP prevents it from being easily answered, and its base card's Drag-Off attack can trap Pokemon in the active spot. Flyterra is a strategy built around 2 powerful Stage 2 Pokemon in Flygon and Torterra. The former's Power Swing attack can deal large damage when your board is fully set up. Its Sand Wall attack can remove stadiums like broken time space from the field and give it damage immunity during your next turn. And the Rainbow Float Pokebody gives your Pokemon that have the same type of basic energy attached to Flygon a free retreat cost, allowing you to switch between high power attackers with ease. Flygon Level X's Extreme Attack can deal 150 damage to any Level X Pokemon on the board, and its Wind Erosion Pokebody can win the game by sitting in the active spot while trapping an opponent's useless Pokemon there with a combination of Memory Berry and Trapinch Sand's Tomb. The Fighting type Torterra helps evolve your Bench Turtwig and Grotle when played from the hand, and can one-hit KO Luxray GL Level X with a Crash Impact attack. The Grass type Torterra can use the Giga Drain attack to deal moderate damage while constantly restoring HP, and can be incredibly difficult for any low damage output deck to KO. Lastly, we have Gyarados. This strategy is built around discarding as many Magikarp as possible for the namesake Pokemon's Tail Revenge attack, which deals 30 damage times the number of Magikarp in your discard pile. Using the combination to stabilize Impersonate to copy the effects of any support in your deck, Pokemon Collector to search Magikarp, and Felicity's Drawing to discard them, this deck accumulates a massive amount of cards in hand and aims to keep a single Gyarados with an extra belt attached to it from being knocked out, while swinging for massive damage every turn. With broken time space in play, cards like Super Scoop Up allows you to fully heal a damaged Gyarados by returning it to hand and re-evolving it in a single turn. Floatzel Level X and Time Space Distortion allow you to recover Gyarados and Magikarp from the discard pile to re-evolve with, allowing you to maintain 3 Magikarp in the discard for maximum damage output. These various strategies and decks only represent a fraction of what's possible in the 2010s World format, as players will discover new decks and innovate on old builds to this day. The format is also a bit more approachable than the EX format due to being more affordable, especially if you're fine playing with the slightly lesser conditioned cards due to decks often requiring no more than 2 Level X Pokemon. 2010 World format is another wide open, highly skillful format where players can customize their decks to fit their playstyle. And that's it for the video. If you want a deeper dive into any other formats in this video, or want to see a video going over some of the formats we didn't cover in this video, let us know down in the comments below.